Good morning, Million.
Good morning, David.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Great to have you along at our 8 Mile Plains live stream.
Morning, everyone.
Now, I was thinking, Million, about 4 weeks ago, or just over 4 weeks. Well,
Yes.
4 weeks ago today, actually, I was looking somewhat in the wars with a sling and multiple stitches and so on, but I'm pleased to report that as a result of 4 weeks being passed on Wednesday, I am now back to, almost normal in terms of the arm. Even went for a mountain bike ride this week. Did get a little bit sore, so I kind of cut that short, but feeling much better. And I'd also found out that week that my wife had been made redundant, but I'm also happy to report that she has been re-employed.
Wow.
And finished her first week at her new job this week. So we can be thankful for, even though there's ups and downs in life, God has these things under control, and we look forward to better times ahead.
That's a great news, Dave. I'm pleased to hear this information, but also so pleased to see you in one piece, so to say. And please keep it that way.
I'll try. Well, last Saturday, Million, did you catch any of the South Pacific Division presentation with Glenn Townend at 11 o'clock?
Yes, I was actually able to do so. There was an easy way for me. We sent some links, which was fine, but I just simply, Dave, jump on YouTube and just type in the search window, the word which was your church. We are the church. We're the church, and
Yeah.
basically there were 3 windows popped out, and I just saw what is the live stream one, and I just clicked that. It was simple as that.
Excellent. I found it quite intriguing to get a bit of a bigger picture world view in terms of the church, and great to see some special items and choirs there. I noticed that the Brisbane Adventist College had a distinctly Solomon Islander look to it, but then it turned out to be the Betty Karma Adventist College. So it would have been good to identify maybe some of those groups where they
I
were
can
from.
tell you the same thing, as I was watching BAC, and our kids just jumped and said, "Oh, BAC, oh, no, it's not BAC," So yeah.
It was good to be a part of that. I hope you managed to tune in and enjoy that. Coming up in the next week, we have Ingrain at Home this Friday night coming, so encourage our young people to get on board with that. And of course, last night our Secrets of Prophecy continued and will also continue as well. Well, I'd like to interview a couple of people now that are part of our church community, and so hopefully we'll get them online shortly. We're using technology here to zoom them in, and oh yes, we have some people. Who do we have there? Now, can we hear you? Hello, Beck and Ollie.
Hello.
Firstly, Beck, how is your family coping with these pandemic conditions?
Well, they're all back at school now, so everything feels a lot more normal. So,
Okay.
but we got a foster dog for the time in quarantine, who will hopefully be going to a new family this week, a permanent family. So I think our dog, Rover, helped us for the 2 months. We kind of did very little. Nathan's bringing Rover in. Here's
I was going to
Rover.
say, let's see this dog if we can. Ah, there's Rover. What a cutie.
He's a lovely dog, but he's got another family waiting for him.
That's going to be hard when it comes to say goodbye.
Nathan is very, very sad.
Yeah. And Beck, you work as a GP. Has your job and role changed much in these last few months?
It was actually very frightening early on, and I think anyone who works directly in patient care was frightened. Nurses, doctors, anyone who works near a hospital. I think Australia's managed everything very well, but I still wear a mask to work. As soon as I'm finished, I make sure that as soon as I get home, I shower and wash my clothes immediately. I'm very aware at any point this virus could flare up again, and I'm aware all the time about it. But I feel very fortunate we live in Australia and we have healthcare for all. So no socialised medicine. I just feel Australia's done well, and our public has really everyone's done lockdown well, and we've managed to get it under control for now. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, you be careful on the front line there, and of course your family was a little shy, but how are the rest of the family doing?
They're all hiding because they don't want to be on the video, but they're good. Yeah, no, they're Nathan's been working from home since everyone who could was asked to, which has actually made our lives a bit easier having a parent at home most of the time. He took on the bulk of the distance ed with the kids while school was shut. I got to escape and go to work, so that was nice. And I'm very glad school's back. It has made everything feel more normal. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the update. And Ollie, how are you going with our current situation in life this year in 2020?
It's pretty different, but no, it's going all right, which is good. Still got a bit of work at Sanitarium, which is good, so pumping out that Weet-Bix there, and family's doing well, so, I guess there was a few plans that have had to be put on the back burner. That's all good.
And I believe that when you say pumping out the Weet-Bix, I hear Sanitarium Weet-Bix sales are going gangbusters at the moment.
They certainly are. I think with all this panic buying initially at the start of this pandemic, it was one of the staple items that were off the shelf.
I wonder why.
But no, it's a good thing. So there's been a bit of work there, which has been good.
Now, Ollie, sorry if I cut you off there. It's a bit hard to know with the transmission here. Just wondering how you've been part of a young adult connecting every fortnight on a Wednesday. How's that been going?
Yeah, really good. It's been fairly small, but we've had some really good discussions. It's been good to catch up with everyone and just touch base with the other young adults to see how they're going. There's a lot of people still studying at the moment, so just trying to support them and just engaging with them as well. And just touching base at the moment. I think that's just a really important thing at this stage.
Excellent. And anything you can share about Ingrain coming up this Friday night?
Look, it's going to be good. I think we're starting at 7 o'clock, I think, from memory. It's a little bit of a different format, so you have to join us and see how it goes.
No worries. Thanks for that, Ollie. Well, we'll join. I'm going to invite Beck and Ollie to join us a little bit later for our sermon-style presentation with a panel and sort of interview and so on. So we'll hear a little more from them.
Yeah, Ollie, they go on, but basically, David, just a quick question. So that is, once again, to repeat that is for young adults and teens, is that right?
Yeah, so Ingrain is predominantly young adults, but there's not a limitation, so anyone's welcome to join, but particularly senior high school students and anyone after school is the main group that are part of that. Well, I wonder if we might like to pray now, Million, and if you'd be happy to lead us in prayer, let us pray.
Yeah, God, thank you for the opportunity to be together. Thank you for the great weather outside, Lord, and we seek your presence now. Help us to have this relationship with you, the vertical one as well as the horizontal one with each other on this special day, Lord. Thank you for everything, and we long to see you soon. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Million. And one other thing, just while I think of it, is I have had a few of these sheets that I emailed around come back from a number of families when I last promoted it. So if you haven't yet done that, I would love to get some more back. So please feel free to just look back through your emails. If you can't find it, then let me know and I can send it through again. But we'd love to have everyone in 8 Mile Plains Church to share your thoughts. Even if you don't have a family, you can still answer the second half of the questions for yourself. We'd love to get your insight and feedback into how you feel about our church and where to in the future. Well, it's now time for the offering, Million.
Yes.
And where's the offering going today? Is it somewhere closer to home?
Very close, actually, just for our local church. So it's a local church offering. So keep that in mind. And on this note, I also want to thank you all for your contribution and remind us as well the ways how we can actually give our offerings, and that is through the internet Give app, basically either through your phone, mobile phone, or tablet device, but also internet banking like bank transfer. And yeah, so these are quite convenient ways. Thank you for your support, and yeah.
So there is a number of, at the end of the weekly email links that are sent out, there is some ideas there of how you can give through the app and other methods as well. So in terms of local budget, Million, is there any need to collect any local budget? I mean, no one's actually here. Does that mean we don't have any expenses? Or?
Well, expenses are still here. Whether we here or not, we still need to pay our mortgage. We still need to
So we
pay
still
bills.
have to insure the building, even though there's no one even here except for us.
That is exactly right. You know, so there is one. It's like 99. You know, so that's how it is. So yes, we still have ongoing expenses, and that's why we need to. It'll be great to contribute in that context.
Okay. Well, we're going to move now into our discussion, and I'm reluctant to call it a sermon because it's not really a sermon, it's more of a presentation, but we're going to invite our panel back with Beck and Ollie to join us.
While they're joining us, Dave, I just want to invite everyone to acknowledge their presence with feedback. You can also watch us through YouTube, our YouTube channel, that is EMP SDA Church. If you just try to find that channel on YouTube, you'll be able to actually watch us live. And yeah, so please just leave your comments. I believe that will be quite an interesting topic today, and we'd like to connect with you.
I mean, I love to see the chat. It's great to have people engaged in the conversation. So while Ollie and Beck might be part of our panel online, I'd love to see a lot of people contributing through the comment section.
That's exactly.
We can relay those messages back and include everyone in the discussion. So that would be great. So today I want to explore the theme of stewardship, but not stewardship in the way that we usually think of it. Often when we mention the word stewardship in Adventist circles, people assume we're going to be talking about money. But we're not going to be talking about money directly today in the sense of stewardship of our money. But stewardship is a concept in the Bible that relates not just to money, it can relate to time, it can even relate to our talents, how we manage these resources, and even stewardship of the environment, which is something that we're going to focus on a bit today. So first of all, what exactly is stewardship? I came across one definition which said stewardship is the job of supervising or taking care of something, such as an organisation or a property. So the question when it comes to environmental stewardship, what exactly is it? I wonder if Beck or Ollie might be able to offer a thought on what is environmental stewardship.
You go, Ollie.
I guess when I think of environmental stewardship, you can look at it as an individual perspective, but also in a group or collective perspective. So, and then it's sort of looking at the conservation and looking at sustainable practices. So it could be in a church context, it could be in a individual context.
Okay. So I think when it comes to if managing resources or thinking of stewardship in the sense of supervising or taking care of something, if it's environmental stewardship, then obviously that implies taking care of the environment even. So Beck and Ollie, is environmental stewardship something that Christians should even care about?
I definitely think yes. I think God created the earth, and if we believe that, and He gave it to mankind to care for, then how we care for the earth matters to Him. And I believe that how we care for the earth is actually how we care for people, and our earth actually affects people directly. So any argument I've ever heard about how we don't really need to care about the environment because it's all going to burn anyway and we're just going to leave and go and be with God in heaven, actually negates the fact that right now, if our earth is suffering, there are people that suffer because of that, even if it's not us directly.
So it's not just about the environment itself, it's the impact that environmental challenges have in terms of affecting other people. Thank you for sharing that. I guess the other thing that relates to, obviously environment's very much a issue at the moment in terms of something that is being discussed, and there's climate protesters and this kind of thing you see from time to time. Is the concept of environmental stewardship biblical? Now, Beck did share there, creation sort of sets a foundation. If God created the world and He asked us to to look after it or take care of it. That implies something. But are there any other biblical perspectives that might relate to this topic of environmental stewardship?
I think looking at a few verses I've just looking at before, I think there's some really good verses in, I think it's Nehemiah, and also in Isaiah, that sort of look at the concept of, that we're really formed to be stewards of the earth, but also in Genesis it talks about the fact that our first role for Adam and Eve was gardeners, and I think from that perspective we were here to sort of look after the earth. So I think there's so many biblical references to it, but I think that the main one is probably in Genesis, where it discusses that our first role was to be gardeners and look after the animals and help them.
Okay, thanks, Ollie. Beck, did you have any to share?
Yeah, well, Ollie started at Genesis, so the world ends in a garden. So in Revelation, there's a verse that talks about it is from Revelation 11:18 about how the nations are angry, and it goes on to say that, I'll read the whole thing, and the nations became enraged, and your wrath and indignation came, and the time came for the dead to be judged, to reward your servants, the prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, the small and the great, and the time came to destroy the destroyers of the earth. And the earth was created by God, and he called it very good. And I just think, why should we actively destroy or choose to ignore the fact that something is being destroyed that God called very good?
It's a powerful verse, that one. So why do you think people would be inclined to destroy the world, Beck? What other factors come to play that might lead people to take the earth and what God's blessed us with for granted?
I'd probably think it has to do with profit and money. Everything is either money or power. And sometimes we have to choose to actually, to choose the greater good for everyone and the planet, we have to have less. And sometimes we don't want to have less, we want to have more. And carefully managing something takes thought and time, and often means that there's less profit or money to be made.
Yeah, and of course money is a big motivator in the Western world, and that certainly dictates some of that. I think a couple of other verses that come to my mind, Miriam, relate to, they're verses that apply to the general concept of stewardship, and that is basically ownership. And I'm thinking of Psalm 24:1, where it says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." So this concept means that if the world actually belongs to God, then it's not really free for us to just go for a free-for-all and abuse it and trash it. There's a certain responsibility that comes with that.
That's exactly what I wanted to mention, that word which you just used, and Heidi shared another, just one word. Greed is something which basically
It's a definite factor.
Motivates people to do what they do.
Yeah. A couple of other Bible verses come to mind. Deuteronomy 10:14 says, "To the Lord your God belongs the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it." And so there's this concept of, if it belongs to God, then our responsibility is to look after it on God's behalf. Leviticus 25 says, "The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine and you are aliens and my tenants." So in that sense, even the Jews were trusted with this idea that God owned the promised land, and there was this year of Jubilee concept where all land had to be handed back. There's a bit of debate about whether that actually ever happened or not, but the intent there was, I guess, a reminder that it's not just about us accumulating for ourselves, but it's about recognising that it belongs to God and that He's ultimately the owner of it. So find another one in Job 41 says, "Everything under heaven belongs to me." So it's clear from the Bible that the earth is owned by God, and so we're really just caretakers or managers. We have a responsibility to look after it carefully. But I want to now look at a couple of pictures. With the whole COVID-19 pandemic, it has highlighted perhaps some of the levels of pollution that we get used to and we don't even realize. So a number of insights or pictures were shown, and I'm going to show some of these pictures now. And I believe this one's in New Delhi. I can't read my writing or the font from here, but this is actually the same place. And obviously the first picture up above with the bicycle, you can see the smog and pollution. And then this same place after the restrictions and the lockdown, where there's a lot less movement and a lot less transport and industry, and you can see such a dramatic difference there in terms of air quality. Now the next slide that we'll have a look at now, this is the measurement of fine particles in terms of pollution, and you can't always see these because they're invisible to the eye, but they're very fine particles that are polluted into the world. And again, I can't read those percentages from where I'm sitting here, but if you hopefully can see them on your screen, some countries there have quite dramatic reductions in this fine particulate pollution, looking back over a few years ago compared to what they're experiencing during this shutdown. Of course, if we bring it a bit closer to certain cities, we can see this next slide has a, now is that the one of Wuhan? Yes. So here we have, you can see there's a scale along the bottom there in terms of the amount of pollution, and here we have on the left side is currently during the pandemic, during the shutdown, the amount of pollution that was evident and recorded versus a few years back when there was normal pollution happening. So let's bring it home closer to Australia, and here we have Sydney, and it's nitrous oxides, was it? I can't remember the exact chemical or terminology that I'm measuring here, but certainly you can see quite a dramatic difference in pollution during the lockdown versus not the lockdown. And of course, finally, let's look at Brisbane and the Gold Coast. And you can see there that there's still a bit of activity happening on the left, but certainly a lot less than what you see and experience during the Gold Coast and Brisbane. So thanks for putting those slides up. I appreciate that, Casey, and for all your technical assistance as usual at 8 Mile Plains during this time. We have a few comments. Let's share what's coming through on the chat. Thanks,
just a couple of thoughts. Mark Patterson is quoting Genesis 2:15, basically where men, male and female, were put as guardians and servants of the garden. Very good thought, isn't it? So, servants, stewards of that garden and guardians. Also, Stephanie says, just a thought, our world is one that will be destroyed, so it is like our practice ground. If we aren't going to look after it now, would we seem like the type of people who will take care of what God has given us when we are in heaven?
Yeah, that's a good point, because even, I guess, in regard to, why mow your lawn if, when God comes, it's not going to matter if your lawn's 6 foot high. But of course, do we have pride in our house and in our garden, or in the greater garden in terms of the world? Yeah. Any other comments? No. That's it. Okay, I'll keep those comments coming through the chat. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. Of course, when it comes to environmental awareness, it has become something of a controversial issue. You can see, on the one hand, as I mentioned earlier, there's climate protests, and then on the other hand, you have other people that are like, there's climate change, it's all a load of nonsense, we should, it's all just a fear campaign, it's nothing we should worry about. And I guess it's significant that it's also become quite political in Australia, and certain governments have really wrestled with looking at this issue because of the diversity of views there. Interesting Four Corners program a couple of weeks back was actually pointing out that there was actually some unity in Australia in terms of moving towards an emissions trading scheme, and over time it's just become increasingly polarised until now obviously you have sort of extreme views on both sides as a result. But I guess when it comes to Christians, there is, even within the Christian realm, there is quite a diversity of opinion. So, Beck and Ollie, how do we as Christians, I guess, get along when there's this polarisation of views in regard to climate concerns?
I don't know many people under 40 who don't think it's real and don't think it's a concern. I don't know if that just speaks to the people that I'm friends with, or if it is a difference in generations. I'm not sure, but yeah.
That's
What
an
do you
interesting
think, Ollie?
comment. I'd be curious, and please, Ollie, and also anyone in the chat, I'd love to hear your thoughts. There does seem to be a generational difference here, with less concern on the part of the older generation and more concern on the part of the younger generation. I'd love to hear some thoughts on why that might be, or why that, obviously it's a general trend, it's not exclusively true, but yeah, I'd be fascinated to hear some comments. And Ollie, if you have any thoughts on why there's a change here in perspective between generations.
I think it really comes down to the fact that the younger generation, myself and all of my friends, we're going into this sort of season where in the next 20, 30, 40 years we're going to be having to deal with the fallout of not taking action and being good environmental stewards. And I think that's sort of one of the biggest arguments, certainly for to be action, but also for seniors, perhaps it's not really an important thing. We don't have to worry about it. And unfortunately, some people sort of think it's a hoax and we shouldn't be doing anything, which I think is really disappointing. And yeah, so I think it's just looking at the facts as well, and not following ideology. I think that's a really important thing.
Okay, thanks, Ollie. Anyone put any thoughts in the chat there, Million? I'd be curious to hear what people have to say.
I hope that internet connection is good and that refreshed. We haven't got more.
Look, everyone's just listening, enchanted by what we're saying here. But we'd love to hear you. And I guess some of the points that have been made there is, I mean, obviously, the longer you're planning to live, the more of a vested interest you have in the well-being of the planet. That's certainly true.
Pastor David, I mean, I'm no expert in this, but I've done a lot of reading about the conflict in Syria, mainly because, through the ministry of 8 Mile Plains Church, and now keeping on going with Pastor Andre, we have a lot of Syrian friends who are refugees, and there's a lot of people who think that the conflict in Syria began because of a large drought. So when you know people personally who have already had their lives impacted by significant environmental disasters and change, it does make it more urgent, rather than thinking of it as something that might happen a long time in the future. When you know people and obviously there's more to it. Australia's had droughts without an immense civil war, but it does make you start thinking this is an immediate current crisis for people I know right now. And that makes you care more, I think.
It's certainly vested interest, as in when we're personally impacted, whether that be, I think Australia with the extended drought and particularly the bushfires earlier this year, that became perhaps a catalyst to think, well, maybe we are having an impact on our environment and maybe we do need to look at making some changes.
Stephanie has asked a question. Do we see these fears impacting our ability to trust in God? Whatever. Let me just go back, because we just got another one and I lost it here. So let me just do these. Yeah, do we see these fears impacting our ability to trust in God, whatever our opinion is of this environmental stewardship is? And then there is PS postscriptum. I do believe faith includes works. Don't get me wrong, though.
Okay, well it makes a nice little segue into my next thought. Some of you might know of Lloyd Grolleman, the Aussie pastor, and when the bushfires were happening, he put up this post, and I'd love to hear some reaction from both Beck and Ollie, but also from anyone else in the chat as well. I'll just kind of summarise a bit what he had to say. Basically, he says, with our bushfires, many are rising up in alarm and panic at climate change. 20,000 people marched in Sydney today to protest what they see as government inaction. He says, my gut instinct is to point out the utter futility of the marchers and their demands for climate change. He goes on, even if climate change is real, there is not a single thing Australia can do to save itself. That somehow we can manage. I don't know if I've missed a word here, or he missed a word when he wrote it. That somehow we can and then it jumps into a cruel hoax beat up by a duplicitous media and politics. He says, rather than seeing carbon emissions as the problem, I just consider the poor world as getting old. Sure, the pollution we emit into the air is like an old man chain smoking. It is killing him, certainly, but it is not the only factor. We are actually getting old. Our biosystems are breaking down. The world is dying. He continues on, I may be right, I may be not. It doesn't matter. Something awful is happening to this planet, and I acknowledge it. I want to affirm the protesters. I get your fear. I get the anxiety. I know why you are calling the government to action. I don't mock your concerns. I concede them as valid as real. However, protesting to government for answers is a waste of time. The problem is beyond them. Sure, we should actively do what is possible to care for our little corner of the world environmentally. But let's not get carried away with the idea that we can fix this. We cannot. The world is a hospital bed in the palliative care ward. And he continues on. That is why I would point the protesters to Jesus. While governments flounder and flail for solutions and answers, Christians have them. Jesus is coming. He will come before the world dies. He will rescue those who love him. That must be the message of our church. This is not the end, just the beginning. And if you want hope in a world that is crashing, then look to Jesus. He is the hope of the planet, never more than right now. So you see, I guess there's sort of an acknowledgement there that the world is in a predicament. There's, I guess, a bit of an opinion expressed in terms of protesting and so on. I'm imagining that sort of comment there would sort of triggered a certain response in people as they listen to it being read. Beck or Ollie, do you have any thoughts? And while they're commenting, if anyone would like to put their thoughts in the chat.
We have actually 2 thoughts here, or maybe later.
Okay, keep the chats coming, keep the thoughts in the chat, and maybe we'll listen to Beck and Ollie and then come back to the chat. Thanks, Moon.
So I feel those are the comments of a privileged white man living in a safe, healthy country. It's very easy to say, yeah, I feel sorry for you, you can't really do anything, Jesus is coming back, because it isn't actually impacting him directly. But if he was a poor woman living on a delta in Bangladesh and increasing cyclones kept knocking out his village and his kids couldn't eat, he'd probably care a little bit more. And I don't think it's an either or scenario. It's not, there's a great controversy and Jesus is coming back, or we can care for the environment. I think we can actually do both. And I think we are compelled to do both. And I also think that if the word climate change was not there and instead he was talking about sexism or racism, we wouldn't put up with it. We wouldn't go, sure, there's a lot of racism in the world, but Jesus is coming back. It'll be all right. We would actively fight against that. So I probably disagree with almost everything he said.
I think Beck's certainly taken the words out of my mouth, I think, as well. You have to, there's a few comments that he mentions about droughts would still inflict themselves on us, bushfires would continue, and etc. But, and this frequency would be the same, and I reject that. Climate change has caused an increase of these natural disasters. And I'm reminded of the story of Jonah when he went to Nineveh. I remember reading an article was discussing the fact that he went to Nineveh to sort of change their hearts and prophesy about the fact that they need to really change their ways, and with the hope of Nineveh sort of burning. But then Jonah sort of God changed their hearts, and it was everything changed. And I think it's not so much about sort of trying to prophesy. It's the important thing is to sort of I'll just find the actual article where I'm quoting from, because it really, I think, reflects on what was just being discussed here. I think the purpose of disaster prophecy is not to make us huddle down and weather the storm, but to actively work like the people of Nineveh to reform our society and create peace and justice. If we believe that the end times will feature wars and rumours of wars, this should be our calling to do everything we can to curb the jingoism, nationalism and ethnic hatred that led to conflict of all kinds. And if violence seems to be decreasing, sat at a tree will make us rejoice. So I think that's a really good statement that sort of can be a rebuttal to that statement that Lloyd provided.
Okay, thanks for sharing back in Ollie. Now, Million, hopefully the chat is lit up.
Yes, it has. Nathan says it is easier to ignore the impact of some of these environmental factors if we live in a city/country that provides relative safety at the moment from the consequences.
Very true.
Heidi is asking, do we believe in science, or is it all made up? Nathan continues and says, I think that view from Lloyd borders on nihilism. If nothing matters, why do we address any issues in this world? We have a responsibility to look after others in the world when we have the ability to do so. There are many others. I'll just go over. Kylie Tech says, over history, protests have been important for action. Stephanie reminds us on Romans 8:22 and 23. This reminds me of, we know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves who have first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. And then Kylie continues, and that just over the COVID period, the ozone layer has been helped, as we saw earlier. And let me just continue. Stephanie writes, there are so many things in this world that I would like to see changed if we could. For example, human slavery, an absolutely horrifying idea. I think, however, that we can try our best to fix what we can, but there are some things where all I see I can do is sit back and say, Lord, please come quickly and change my heart so I'm ready for you to come. And Heidi concludes, Jesus addressed everything.
Okay, well, thanks for the chat. Keep the comments coming. Now, in terms of what I read, most people seem to be challenging that view. Is there any redeeming points that is made in Lloyd's post there? Anyone have anything to share on that? Or Beck or Ollie, what if you look for something you can agree with that Lloyd says there? What would you pick?
I think looking at his statement, the concept of pointing to Jesus, I think is a good suggestion. I think when we're united in faith, I think that certainly helps us to have a better understanding, and I think we can work together with unity. I think he really does talk about that as being a really good thing. And yeah, I think his perspective is certainly in the right direction. Ultimately, put it to Jesus. So I think that's probably a good thing that I would agree with there.
Thanks, Ollie. Anything you want to add back?
I definitely think we point people to Jesus, but I actually think Jesus would have been with the protesters as well. I think we can trust in Jesus and know he's the hope of the world while acting. Once again, it's not an either or, choose to hope in Jesus or do something. Because I hope in Jesus, I want to do something.
Okay.
I agree with backing that too, yeah, definitely.
All right, any comments in the chat there, Million? Or we're
I believe they're on their way. So.
They're coming. Okay, keep those comments coming. We'd love to hear.
Happy for people to disagree.
Yeah.
Nathan says, I think from Lloyd's idea around the assurance of salvation is important in relieving what some might experience as climate anxiety. Stephanie says, I don't know, but I do think there is a level of paranoia in the world today, which I think may take a possibly real issue and extrapolate it to an extreme fear, causing a problematic level of anxiety.
That's a very interesting perspective, because I guess a question that came to my mind is, should Christians be anxious about the environment? And maybe, I guess it's hard to define exactly what I mean here, but as in, obviously, if you don't believe in God and the planet is coming to an end, then there's a certain anxiety and fear that comes with that. How should Christians relate to these kind of issues in terms of...
I can jump into that question, actually. You just mentioned, sorry, I cut you off. I hope I haven't. should actually, why would we, this is just my thinking, why would we necessarily limit that term anxiety, aka something else, to just one portion of it? So should a Christian be anxious
Anxious
at
in
all?
general.
In general, you know.
Good point. Any thoughts on that, Beck or Ollie?
I think, you know, if someone you know and love is smoking cigarettes, you care about them, you know they'll die one day, but you do actually want them to be as healthy as they can, and you want them to change now. So, you know, if our country is smoking, even though we know one day our country will end, we still want to do something about it now.
I think that's a good comment.
Heidi's asking, should Christians be anxious about the lost? Very good point. So, Dave, if I may add to this discussion here, you know, sometimes we might tend to focus on one thing which is relevant and important, and yet lose from our perspective and side other things which are important as well. I think that in that context, balance is important to emphasize.
I guess one way to think of it too is, you know, if you look at it as a continuum, on the one hand you might have panic and anxiety, on the other extreme is you just don't care about anything. Perhaps there's a point of genuine concern, which is not panicky in the sense that, you know, you're, as in, it's a concern, I mean, alert but not alarmed, I guess is what I'm saying, as in there's a concern without kind of being panicked about an issue. Now, in terms of the Adventist Church, they have made a few comments, interestingly not for quite some time. I saw a couple of statements that Ollie emailed me coming back from 1995, which seems like a very long time ago now, and yet given that this issue has become even more in the news lately, it's interesting that as a church we haven't really said much about it. But in terms of, there was a statement on the environment that the church said, the Seventh-day Adventists declare their advocacy of a simple, wholesome lifestyle where people do not step on the treadmill of unbridled consumerism and production of waste. They call for respect of creation, restraint in the use of the world's resources, and re-evaluation of our needs as individuals. So here we have a statement that is highlighting, I guess, a Christian perspective of environmental stewardship that is obviously being encouraged as a church. Ollie or Beck, do you have any thoughts to share in regard to that church statement and maybe the silence that we've seen since?
I think the statement's a good statement. I think it's brilliant. It's just a shame that we haven't sort of had a new one since 1995. I mean, because a lot of the issues that they talk about, consumerism and the production of waste, has just skyrocketed. And that's partly due to sort of the capitalist society that we live in, because that's, you know, consumerism, etc. But I think that the statement is certainly much more applicable today than it probably was in 1995. So I think there certainly needs to be probably a renewed look at that and making that really as probably at the forefront of part of our purpose as a church, to really make that an awareness, I think, certainly.
Yeah,
I encourage people to have a look at a website called blessedearth.org, I think it is. I'll put it in the notes what it actually is. And it's by a gentleman called Dr. Matthew Sleeth. And he's a doctor. I don't know if he's an Adventist or not, but he talks a lot about Sabbath keeping as a way of helping the earth, and you know, talking about working 24/6. And he said, you know, we're made to rest, the earth is made to rest, and he has a very biblical call to it. I just think that Sabbath keeping is so central to Adventists. It's part of our name. And part of the reason for Sabbath keeping is not just for us, it's for all of creation. Like, God is a holistic God. He doesn't divide us into people and everything else and never the twain shall meet. He actually realises that we're part of the earth that he placed us in. And the things he's given us are also benefits for the earth. So if people rest and break the cycle of constantly consuming and constantly making, it's actually good for people and the earth. And there's many interwoven things in our special strand of Christianity that I feel really support the idea of looking after our earth, that the strong belief in creation, the strong belief in the Sabbath, the belief that, you know, we're taken to heaven and one day we actually come back down and inherit this earth. So this earth is actually going to be where we live eventually forever. So all of these are things that really meet with our faith, but we don't seem to concentrate on them. And when an issue is such a big issue worldwide, why don't we actually leverage our good, strong biblical beliefs that also agree with that? Like, it's an issue that young people are fired up about. Why don't we talk about it more? You know, there are really good answers in the Bible for the concern about the environment.
Just on that too, I think we've got so many fantastic people in our church that have so many skills and abilities, and I think just talking about it more at least is really an important start, and just to have some more general conversation, because I think we have been putting off, just been throwing it under the carpet for so long, and actually not acknowledging that yes, this is an issue, and we need to, as a church, we need to be doing our bit to make a difference in regards to the environment. I mean, it's a massive issue, and the fact that our church is also a broad church. We have a lot of churches in the Pacific Islands, and you know, they're not big islands, and unfortunately, with the result of climate change, they've been having a lot of issues, and so our sister churches are going to be affected. So I think from that perspective, at least, we certainly need to be making be a bit more proactive in this area, I think.
Thanks. Any comments coming through on the chat?
Yeah, there's a few. Kylie Tech says, when you see people and animals being hurt and extinguished, how can we not want to help and be involved? John McNaught sharing Matthew 24:7, preach the word, and I think it is quite important to emphasize that aspect as well in the context of balance. Heidi is asking, should Christians be a positive force in the world? Certainly yes, I mean, making a difference in this world. Anxiety, Heidi continues, as a motivation for action. That's interesting. That's an interesting thought.
As in, it can be a motivation.
I don't know what Heidi thought here. Was it just a question, or just but we can discuss about that, you know. So, do we act because of anxiety or something else? Stephanie has a good point here. What your question makes me think, David, is what the difference between caring and anxiety. To care to me is to try to treat things correctly and help it, but anxiety is fear. God told us not to fear, but to focus and trust in Him. And we certainly shouldn't allow fear to make us create problems for others, as we can see some protesting can do. And protesting can be quite violent when people got really emotionally invested. So I guess it is important to find that line. Where is that line? How to say your thing, how to speak up.
I mean, interesting comment there in terms of emotional investment, because I think this is just one of a number of issues that does trigger a certain amount of emotional investment. And I had an interesting experience this week. A number of Facebook friends that from my wife's mother's group when she was young and had a baby. One of them put up this picture of what seemed like a spectacular plane coming in, landing on the nose wheel, the whole plane going up sideways and then landing. Now, I've watched too many air crash investigations to believe that this is a real video, because a 747 can't take all its weight landing hard on its nose wheel, and all the engines don't hit the ground and drag along and the whole plane stays intact. It would have ended up as a ball of flames and engines and bits flying off everywhere. So I did point out that, you know, this was a computer generated, often these flight simulators, you can get the footage of what it looks like from the outside. And they were kind of trying to argue with me that this was real. And I had this dilemma of, how much do I argue over such a trivial thing? But the truth part of me is like, you idiot, this is obviously a computer generated thing. Can't you see the obvious? And I did point out a few things, and eventually she was convinced. So I rested at peace But then straight after this, another one from the mothers group goes, "Ah, what amazing pilots to keep that plane, then everyone's safe." And I'm just like, ah. So I want to introduce the idea here of, on the one hand, I want people to know the truth, but on the other hand, I don't want to come across as a know-it-all. And so I think when it comes to these sort of divisive issues in the church, the question is, how do we kind of share our view in a controversial space in a way that doesn't come across as a know-it-all, but also is we're able to share the issues that are real issues and issues that might concern us. So I wonder if Beck or Ollie have any thoughts on that, and please contribute in the chat as to how we can discuss these things in a way that reflects the humility of Christ.
Well, Beck and
Is
Ollie
it actually a controversial issue? Like, this is the thing.
For some,
I don't
for
know.
some it seems to be.
Yeah, can you talk to me, people who feel it, who disagree? I can talk very nicely, but I'm actually quite interested to know people who don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, and in the chat, feel free to contribute if you have an alternate view. We'd love to hear.
Well, when you mentioned chat, there is Beck shared with us that link for this book, Sabbath Living, a Ministry of Blessed Earth. Very interesting concept. Thanks, Beck, for sharing that. That's good. Stephanie's saying, was this Nathan? Yeah. Anyway, so Stephanie's saying, if we are anxious and as a warrior, I think about this: can we be giving the true witness that God gives us the fruit of the Spirit, which includes both joy and peace? But I do think we need to care for others, which includes trying to save the lost and make nature as comfortable as we can in the world.
So
Prayer
Pastor Milia,
sometimes is the only answer I can think of the arguments. Yeah. Sorry, Beck, I was reading the comments, so I didn't hear you.
So in general practice, we talk about using, if we have anxiety, using it for action, and rather than seeing it as a bad thing, seeing it as something that will make us act.
Yeah.
So I actually don't think anxiety put to work is a bad thing. And if we feel anxious on something and it makes us go and do something, that's actually a very positive thing. And, you know, once again, if we were living in Bangladesh and getting increasing cyclones and our villages were flooding and we didn't really have anywhere to go, we should be anxious. We have to be anxious. It's inappropriate not to be. And that should then spur action. And for those of us who are sitting in Australia, you know, more than 10 metres above sea level, our anxiety should spur us to action for them. So I actually don't see anxiety as a bad thing. Sometimes we need to be anxious to make us to change.
Yeah, I guess a lot depends how you understand anxiety.
That's exactly what was my point. What is the definition of how do we see anxiety?
I mean, certainly sometimes we need that little jolt of a crisis, and I was sharing with someone just before about, you know, if you have an assignment due, you know, there's that kick in of stress and anxiety that hits you, which is actually good to get you started on it if you're a compulsive procrastinator that I hear some other people are. I've never experienced that myself. But moving on, as to make this practical, what do we do? If we have a concern for the environment, what does that actually mean in terms of our day-to-day decision making? And of course, we noticed the verse in Genesis 2 before that the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it, the NIV says, to tend and watch over it, the NLT says, to farm the land and to take care of it, God's Word version says. So if we take that verse seriously, what does that actually mean in terms of how we live our lives? Beck and Ollie, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think firstly it's important to actually just have discussions like this regularly, just to keep it in the forefront of our minds and get different perspectives as well. I think we should be when it comes to taking care of the environment, certainly thinking about our waste, etc., and that sort of thing, but also looking at what can we as a church do to really make a positive impact in the communities, in terms of waste management or I guess community gardens and the like, really making a difference in supporting the community as well, because I think we have a lot of resources and abilities in our church to make quite a difference, not just for our church members, but also for our community. And I think ultimately that's what the point is that we sort of take the lead and be a good representation of what it is to be as an individual, but also as a church, good environmental stewards. And yeah, so it is better waste management, catching public transport on a regular basis. I know a lot of our members do. Anywhere that you can, I guess, we've got Pathfinders, and that's really proactive in the environment as well. So, looking at things like that, just talking about the environment and looking at other ways we can be a bit more adaptive, I think, as well.
Hey, thanks, Ollie, for a couple of practical suggestions there. While Beck's just going to comment, feel free to put some comments in the chat. Thanks, Beck.
I always think that one of our biggest powers as people is where we spend our money. So maybe being quite intentional in where you spend your money. There's a big movement to end fast fashion, which will protect garment workers in the third world and fabric waste and many other things. So intentionally choosing clothes that are made ethically by workers that are paid properly, and not buying an entire new wardrobe each year. Trying to live on a bit less. The idea of tithe is very good because it makes us realise that all our money is not our own. Everything we're given is not ours. Some of it, or large bits of it, belong to God. Thinking about where you invest your money. Most Australians have superannuation. You get some say where that goes. Trying to think where I'm investing my money actually talks about what I believe in. So thinking a little bit about that, basically thinking before you buy something. Do you need it? Who's being supported by it? What the outcome of it is.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Beck. Some good practical suggestions there. Any thoughts in the chat?
Yeah, there is a practical thought and as well as a question, and we do welcome those comments, and I believe that is family, that we have different thoughts. And so Kylie's saying the flight or fight response. So it's a well-known reaction. So good on you, Kylie. So how do we face those fears, so to say, or situation, whatever the situation is? Stephanie's saying, just curious about people's views. Do we feel as a church family that we are comfortable and loving to each other enough that we can raise controversial topics and be honest about our opinions in a discussion, even if the opinions may be different to the majority?
I would love to think that we can do that.
Yeah,
as a
I would
church.
too.
Absolutely.
Our
I just think on that
history,
as well. Sorry,
even
David,
as I was going to say, our history as a denomination is there have been certain sort of no-go areas which I'd like to think that we can be part of where there's enough trust between us. That
Everything's a go area.
That's right.
Should be. Sorry, Ollie, you're going to say something?
Oh no, I think Beck said it as well. We've
What did you
put
say,
these
Beck?
issues under the carpet a bit as well, and I think we just need to talk about it and agree to disagree sometimes, but just have the conversation and think about it. And because we unfortunately probably don't deal with conflict too well in our church, and this is really a good opportunity to really look at that and maybe address that as well.
Yeah, good opportunity to practice. Interestingly, just thinking big picture in terms of Australia, often you get the impression through the media that there's this big sort of extreme positions in regard to the environment, but the ABC did a Australia Speaks program, and as part of that, I can't remember the exact stats, but it was up near 80% of Australians were willing to actually pay a bit of money towards a cleaner environment. And I know when I run along Gardner Road, there's a lot of rubbish down the side of the road, and the question is, would you rather live in a clean place or would you rather live in a dirty place? We've mentioned before in terms of finance and money. I've seen some documentaries on intensive pig farming in America, and basically they've worked out a way to make pork or ham or whatever you want to call it as cheap as possible. But the sad thing is to see this in action is these pigs are just squashed into these things where they never see a green blade of grass in their entire lives. They're pumped to this feed, and then of course there's all the excrement coming from these pigs, and then there's the impact that has on the environment when that's being put into waterways and so on. So at the end of the day, for me, the question is, do we want to live in a clean environment, or do we want to just maximise the dollars and to heck with the consequences that might come? Thanks, Ollie and Beck, for sharing with us today. We're come to the end of our time, but we appreciate you taking the time to zoom in and share your thoughts with us. Are there any final comments in the chat, Million, before we close?
There are some of them could be also opening topics as well.
Well, we might have to save them for next time, but
it says,
give them to us.
Kirli Riley says, I think we have a responsibility to not bury our heads in the sand, to educate ourselves around current issues so we can contribute constructively and with relevance. So not to get overwhelmed by all the issues facing our works, we can break it down into what we personally can do, even if it's just something small. Very good point, Kirli. In other words, this is our community, what we can do in our world, in our capacity. Stephanie is saying, okay, then to test the topic, I don't know whether I do believe climate change is as real a large issue as people are making it out to be. It may be, but I have heard conflict views arguing that it isn't so. So in the end, I do think the world is having problems just as Matthew 24 predicted. I just don't know how much of the problems are being generated because of the media possibly presenting an extreme view. So yeah, it's
good to have some diversity there.
There we go.
And I guess the more we listen to each other, the more we gain a perspective and an understanding of where people are coming from. Even if we don't necessarily agree on some certain issues, it's always good to get an insight into, or to understand how people come to the conclusions that they've reached, and I think that's always a helpful thing.
And Dave, I think that is a good characteristic of a healthy family, for good conversations. Healthy conversations without a fear, what I'm going to be understood, am I going to say this in good ways so people love me, or no, let's just have that environment where we can freely talk about topics even if we see them differently.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to close with prayer now, and let's pray. Lord God, we just want to thank you that you have entrusted us with this world. It is an amazing universe and an amazing world that we get to share together, and we thank you for that. And I just pray that as we've looked at the Bible evidence that encourages us to manage it well for you, to take care of it, that we might be all challenged today to think about how we can make a difference and what we can personally do to make this world a better place. We thank you for these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So thanks again, Beck and Ollie. Appreciate you joining us. Don't forget, families, that if you can dig up your email, have a little chat over lunch today to explore some of those questions, and email me back your answers as a family. That would be fantastic. Any final thoughts, Million, before we leave for today?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Beck and Ollie. Look forward to seeing you next week. Let's send greetings and happy Sabbath to everyone. So, see you soon.
Okay, thanks for joining us today, everyone.
Bye.